Today on Education Forum, Political Science and Public Administration at Columbus State University, a new professor at CSU. From the studio, high atop Jordan Hall in the College of Education and Health Professions at Columbus State University in Columbus, Georgia, this is Education Forum with your hosts Jeff Conklin and Greg Blaylock. Welcome to Education Forum. I'm Jeff Conklin. Greg Blaylock is on assignment, so my co-host today is Louisa Ramirez. Welcome, Louisa.
Thank you for having me today. I'm holding him hostage so I can make my big break today.
That is assignment. Today's guests will be talking about political science and also the degree in public administration here at Columbus State University. Our guest today is Dr. Nicholas Easton. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you, Jeff.
Glad to have you on the show.
Thanks.
Well, you're an assistant professor here, and you've been here, what, about a year?
Just about a year, yeah.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about your background. Where are you from?
I'm originally, well, let's see, I was born in Albany, New York, but I grew up in Providence, or outside of Providence, Rhode Island. And
okay.
I had a career in politics in Providence, ending in about 1990, and worked for the city of Providence off and on, and some nonprofits. And my background has basically been as a practitioner.
Okay.
And then I got into education about 10 years ago, started working on my master's degree and then my PhD, and finally finished that up last year, and working on deciding what I want to be when I grow up.
Okay, that's good. So now, what did you do when you were in politics?
I was president of the city council in Providence. I was a city councilman representing a poor minority district, and raised 7 children in the inner city.
Okay.
Ultimately, 14 grandchildren we're up to at the moment.
Wow.
But was very involved in inner city politics, inner city life in Providence, in a very poor neighborhood.
Is there a large inner city in Providence?
Yeah, there is. Providence is about the size of Columbus.
Okay.
But
okay.
It has a slightly different feel because it's a capital city, and an old city, and it represents the heart of a large metropolitan area. So it feels much bigger than it really is.
Okay. Okay. Now, you said you were elected for 10 years?
I was elected for 12 years.
12 years, okay.
Spent 6 years as city councilman before becoming city council president, so total of 12 years.
Okay. So now that you've moved south, is politics different down here?
Oh, it's warmer.
Yeah, warmer,
especially
absolutely.
This year.
Yeah.
Especially this year. I'm only just beginning to tell. I've become pretty impressed with local government here in Columbus. I think it's very efficient. It certainly is a different style of politics. It's funny, I talk a lot about ethnic politics, which is one of the areas that I study a lot with my students. And down here, ethnic politics is really quite unknown. Ethnic politics basically means black, white, and possibly Hispanic.
Right.
But up north, it means Irish, Italian, Portuguese, Polish. We have a whole bunch of different groups in Providence.
Yes, you do, and it's not the same here at all.
No, it's not, and it's kind of a funny feel.
I bet it is. Quite a change.
Yeah.
So you do work with minorities in politics. What made you go into that area?
Well, I was always interested in poverty. I was always interested in the questions related to poverty, but also it was sort of where I ended up. I mean, a city councilman represents his neighborhood, and I ended up marrying my wife, who had been married before and had a house in this neighborhood where I had lived, and so I was pretty settled down there, and decided to get into politics, and so that was my constituency. So I worked with the people that I thought needed representation, and tried to deal with some very difficult problems.
What were you doing before politics?
Oh, did I do anything before? I had been a community organizer, actually.
Okay.
Like our president, working with the same sorts of neighborhoods, mostly in Providence, but sometimes in neighborhoods surrounding that. I don't want to quite call them suburban neighborhoods, but small cities around Providence.
Okay.
And working with the same Alinsky-style organizing tactics that Barack Obama worked with in Chicago.
Let's take that a little further. When you say community organizing, what do you mean?
Community organizing, as practiced by Alinsky organizers, basically tries to use the same techniques that you would use in union organizing or any other power building type of organizing, and try to build power in inner city neighborhoods through the development of block clubs. And also, Alinsky is very big on using the existing organization of a community. He says, we don't organize a community, it's already organized. We have to figure out how it's organized and how to build power among among the people in those existing organizations to be able to take on City Hall and, as importantly, some of the slum landlords and people who are responsible for the decline of neighborhoods.
So the structure's there. You just have to find it and work with it.
And it's kind of fun, and it's something that all politicians should know too. And I tell potential candidates that you should understand the structure of your community. And even neighborhoods that seem very poor, we certainly look around here. If you ignore the structure of the churches in a place like Georgia, you're not going to get very far. No. And it's a great potential for organizing and building political power.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now you were saying that you also did some work with nonprofits?
Yeah, I worked with some nonprofits. Helping to build, I think I've actually started or been one of the founders of half a dozen nonprofit organizations and served on the boards of several of them. One of the ones I was most proud of was an organization in Providence that my mother-in-law and I started called SWAP. Stood for Stop Wasting Abandoned Property.
Ah, okay.
And what we did was we took some of the abandoned houses that had been in the neighborhood that we represented and some of the surrounding neighborhoods. And for a long time, Alinsky organizing operates on the principle that you've got to try to get quick and easy results.
Okay.
And so the block clubs usually would focus on getting a abandoned house torn down.
Okay. My
mother-in-law was at heart a great preservationist, and she said, you know, why are we tearing down all these houses? So when they came to her and talked about the house next door that they wanted to tear down, she said, absolutely not. So what we did was, instead, we went and picketed the landlord and got him to sell the house for $500.
Okay.
And then she went and found a neighbor, a Portuguese person, actually, who was interested in the house and had some family that they were bringing over from Portugal, and they bought that house, and that became a model. We ended up doing 1,000 houses over the course of 10 years.
Wow,
so I was very proud, and I always am quick to add, I started the organization and served on the board, but mostly other people did most of the work.
You weren't proud of nails.
Right, that's right. But I was proud of how much the organization accomplished.
I don't know if you've looked around in Columbus, but sounds like there's a need for that here.
I live in the historic district.
Okay.
And one of the reasons that I live there, well, I have to confess, the proximity to Uptown is a big reason.
Yes.
But it's very much the kind of neighborhood that I represented in Providence. And I'm very interested in working with the historic preservation group there and some of the other groups. I've already met with people from a number of different local groups, and I'm working very hard to get involved in just a lot of exciting projects. This is such a city on the move, and it's fun to be aware of that and to see the potential where you could fit yourself into the picture and be able to add something to it. So I'm psyched for it.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good, because that's what you need.
Yeah.
And sometimes we need a little outside influence, because people don't realize what they have.
Yeah, and we can't have academia sitting around doing nothing. I mean, presumably we're developing some expertise and some knowledge and some experience, and we need to find ways to apply that to problems. I graduated from Brown in Providence and worked there for a little while in a non-academic capacity, and spent a lot of time fighting with people at Brown to be more involved in the community because they had so much to offer. And I used to say to them, you've got a laboratory here.
Sure.
A
Sure.
community
Get
with
out
all
there.
kinds of issues and problems. And they do a lot, but I still am disappointed that they don't do more.
You're talking about university. What's the importance of university and the political aspect of today's world?
It's hard to guess. We see students becoming a force again over the last 2 elections, and that's exciting. And I see a lot of political activity on campuses. So student awareness is something that I've been very impressed with here at CSU, and I hope it's not unique. As much as I love CSU, I hope that this sort of thing is happening all over the place. But colleges are going to play more and more of a role in American politics, and I hope that's a permanent thing. When I say more and more of a role, I hope it isn't just a fad. I hope it's something that will keep going. And a lot of my writing is about how we build political power at the grassroots, and the leading edge of that in many ways is students and universities, and they offer a great potential for organizing.
I feel like nowadays the political movement of students have declined so much compared to the 60s, and maybe it's going to start coming up again. What do you think?
Yeah, that's from having professors like me that always talk fondly of our days in the 60s when college campuses were so active. And what I see is I see it coming back a little bit. It's not the same. Nothing's ever the same. And we'll see if it gets more deeper engagement. The engagement at this point, I think, is a little superficial. I think it's kind of temporary, and I'd like to see it getting a little deeper. But we'll see if that develops. I am impressed so far with the staying power of college activism, and so I would like to see if that gets deeper, and students feel the kind of boldness that we did in the 60s, that where we can take on issues. We have every right to take on political issues. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. And I don't want Dr. Mescon to think that I'm advocating the takeover of his office.
A rabble-rouser from the north coming down here.
That's right.
You mentioned the movements of the 60s and some of the 70s as well. And we had a war going on then. There was a reason for people to come together. And then after that, it kind of trickled away. I mean, once we got rid of Nixon,
yeah, there's one big
changed.
difference.
Yeah?
It's the D word, the draft.
The draft, yes,
The draft
absolutely. We lived in fear of that.
Right, exactly. One of the things that I teach a lot about in politics and write a lot about is that politics is really about self-interest.
Okay.
And people really operate on their self-interest. So the reason why the college campuses were such hotbeds of activity in many ways, and I don't want to say that it doesn't extend beyond that basic self-interest.
Sure.
I and many people that I was involved with in college were as active in civil rights issues as we were in the anti-war movement.
And that was the time.
And that was the time.
Yes.
But the anti-war movement affected us.
Oh, sure.
And so every college kid at that time was very aware that the draft was not going to last. I'm sorry, that the exemption for college students was not going to last forever, and felt the draft on their neck, if you will. Excuse the pun.
Sure. Sure.
And so that is one of the big motivators. And lacking that today, college campuses don't have that need to be politically involved. That drive.
Right,
so,
right.
so it's going to be different.
Yeah.
But as I say, things are always different.
Sure, sure, as it evolves.
Yep.
Good, good. Were you involved on campus at that time?
I was not really. I went to Brown.
Okay. Which should have been a good place for that.
It was.
Pretty
It was
liberal,
very. Yeah. No. I mean, it was an Ivy League school, and the Ivy League was at the heart of the anti-war movement. I was somewhat involved with. I mean, I went to a few rallies, but what I was really involved with, I was doing my community organizing even then.
Okay.
In inner city neighborhoods, so I was very, very involved in the civil rights movement. So much so that it took me a little extra time to finish my college career, because I was spending all my time at rallies and doing organizing, and I'm told you're supposed to be writing papers and all that sort of thing.
Something like
Didn't
that.
figure that out until a few years later.
Life was a little more important at that
That's
time.
right. That's right. Life is too important to spend your time on education.
How politically aware was your family at the time? What was your upbringing? Very political?
Oh,
or?
yes. My father was a staunch Republican, pro-war, conservative, anti-civil rights, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My mother was quiet and we'll never know how liberal she was. She swore she always voted Republican, but she's had some real liberal learnings. So we're not leanings, I should say. So we're not completely sure. But all of my brothers and sisters ended up as pretty liberal Democrats, with the exception of my eldest brother, who was a Republican until recently.
Recently?
Yeah, he
Saw the light.
he saw the light. That's right. We finally wore him down.
That's it. Was it difficult for you growing up in a family that was Republican like that?
No, because I was too. I was
Oh.
until you know, I remember you know, my Goldwater stickers and
Oh, man.
and
Oh, man.
I had a Texas horned toad, which was, you know, the equivalent of a salamander back then. During the 1960 convention, Democratic convention, my father hated Kennedy more than Johnson, so I ended up naming my Texas horned toad Lindy, because my father was briefly a Lyndon Johnson supporter, anything to stop Kennedy, which didn't work.
I had the opposite.
Did you?
Oh, yeah, because I was a liberal. And,
Yep.
you know, went right at the old man all the time, and it just,
Yep.
you know.
Yeah, I didn't dare go after my father that way. But he saw, you know, well, I have a fairly strange background, which I don't want to get into too much detail. But my parents were old Yankees of lots of money.
Okay.
Until my father's generation, and there's a book written about Buddy Cianci, former mayor of Providence, in which they talk a little bit about me, and they talk about how I came from 13 generations of blue blood, but only 12 generations of green money. And so I grew up in a very wealthy town where my father, my grandmother had an extra house, and we were quite poor.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was very aware of that that difference.
Okay.
And that's what led me to be involved in this
Kind
sort
of
of thing.
drove you that way.
Yeah, it really
Okay,
did.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is a good place to take a break. I'd like to remind you, you're watching Education Forum. I'm Jeff Conklin. Hi, we're back in Education Forum with our special guest, Dr. Nicholas Easton, who is an assistant professor in political science and public administration in the College of Arts and Letters. No, Letters and Science, excuse me. Now, Nick, before we went on the break, we were talking a little bit about organizing, community organizing, getting out the vote. Let's talk a little bit about that. How much of that have you done?
Oh, more than I can count.
Okay.
I was involved. We ran on the city council. We ran every 4 years, but we had state legislators that ran every 2 years.
Okay.
And there was the presidential elections that we always were involved in. In politics, in places like Rhode Island, which are very active political areas, politics is a full-time game, and so
Okay.
you're involved in getting ready for the next election the minute that the last election ends. So there was always political organizing,
Okay.
and I had been a community organizer before that, so that was one of the reasons that I got involved in politics.
Okay.
I feel like that's one of the strategies that Obama did. As soon as he finished his last election, he just stayed out there for 4 years working with the community.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I'm still trying to understand it all, and I think so are a lot of people. To what extent this new I had been a supporter of Obama's, and so I continue to get those emails for Organizing for America, as it's now called, and I'm intrigued that they keep it going. It seems to be having some impact, but I'm concerned about the depth of it. Mm-hmm. And as I said to you during the first segment, I'm concerned about how deep this involvement is. Is it kind of a fad? Is it Facebook deep, or is it go beyond that?
That's a good point. Facebook deep. Now, what are your thoughts? I mean, you're saying, you know, I wonder about it, but how do you feel? What do you think?
I honestly don't think it's sustainable at the present
Okay.
level, at the present configuration.
Okay.
I think it's a little bit of a fad. Facebook is a powerful, and you know, I say Facebook, but YouTube, Twitter, all of those things
Yes.
are powerful media, powerful forces, powerful opportunities, but they have so many different directions they can go. How long will they stay focused on things like politics? And a lot of my work in politics is about the idea that politics has to be based on what in the old machines was called the exchange system, that the voter knew that they got something for supporting the party, and the party knew that they had to produce constantly.
To get the vote.
It's a 24/7, 365 game, and I'm not sure that the setup of OFA, as impressive as it is geared to maintain real focus that long.
So you don't see it as a true political machine?
Oh, not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Okay.
But you know, I write about machines, and one of the points that I make is that machines have a lot of different configurations.
Okay.
And so in some ways it has a lot of the characteristics of a machine, but it lacks that central thing, which is the exchange system.
Yes.
You have to be able to convince people that are involved that they get something immediate. Alinsky used to say about issues that he would organize around that they had to meet 3 criteria: immediate, realizable, and specific. And whenever you chose an issue to organize your block club around, you had to meet those 3 criteria for your issues. Now, by immediate, he didn't mean in time, he meant in space.
Okay.
It had to be in your face, something that bothered you.
Okay.
Realizable, it had to be something that you could win so that you would build power, so that people would feel like they had accomplished something.
A big part of it.
And
sure.
specific, we used to say we don't fight for world peace, we fight for getting this particular problem solved. We don't fight to make a better neighborhood. We fight to get rid of the vacant house across the street from you that's bothering you.
Okay.
And that principle applies to politics too. So people have to feel like they're getting something. And you look at the president's situation right now, where he's slogging along just trying to accomplish anything. So there's a lot of challenges there to make this sort of model work for a real political empowerment.
Is it easier to do on a smaller level, like the city, the county, the state?
One of the principles of political machines was the hierarchical structure.
Okay.
And that works because you have a structure where you're organizing on a local basis, so you can accomplish things for people, so that you can work with people, help them get things done. And that doesn't have to be, you know, political machines had this reputation as being corrupt, and there were corrupt aspects of it, always.
Sure.
But I always say political machines were corrupt, but the corruption didn't apply to the machine, it applied to the politics.
To the people.
The politics is always has levels of corruption in it.
Sure. Well, and I always think of the Chicago machine.
Yeah.
That's one I was most familiar with.
Absolutely.
And you know, that's deeply ingrained. But you went to your alderman and you got things done.
Exactly. And your alderman, and I mean, as I say, small legitimate things. Right now, if you have a sidewalk that needs to be fixed, you call a number, you get a answering machine.
Yes.
Eventually you get through to somebody, and then you tell them that you want your sidewalk fixed, and they give you a number, and 5 years later you call back and say you still didn't fix it or something.
Exactly.
In the old political machine, you went to your ward chairman and said, can we get this sidewalk fixed? And it got done.
And it was done,
So, you know, I hesitate. My writing is about using the principles of machines to build power for poor people today, because it did that in its day. But I understand some of the problems, some of the concerns people have about corruption and about bossism and about favoritism. But I'm not sure that we haven't thrown out the baby with the bathwater with our new bureaucratic approach to things.
Okay.
And talking about poor people, as you mentioned, what about government assistance programs? What do you think is one of the most important ones?
The most important one by far is the Earned Income Tax Credit.
Okay.
The Earned Income Tax Credit, which was put forth by Nixon and Reagan originally, but greatly expanded by Bill Clinton. It allows people who work for a living and are raising a family, it's usually single parents, to be able to get money back on their taxes that they didn't put in.
Yes.
So that you might get and now it's up to $5,000 or $6,000 more you can get. So it overcomes so many problems. It means that you have to be working.
Right.
Which overcomes the objection that so many voters have.
Right.
It means that you can work at almost any kind of a job, and we don't have to worry about the minimum wage issues. You can be making minimum wage and still make a living wage because that program's giving you the extra money. So I think it is the heart of where we're going to make real change for dealing with issues of poverty in the future. And I look to see it expanded further when we get into a more liberal age. We've been in a conservative age for about 40 years now, and I think that's starting to turn.
Okay.
So I would look to programs like that and watching them expand in a way that can please both liberals and conservatives, I think.
And it rewards those that are working, the working poor.
It rewards working poor. One of the great objections that liberals have these days is the idea that you have people working hard and unable to support their family. So why should they bother to work?
Yeah.
I mean, if you can't support your family without illegal, or let's at least say extra legal activities,
Off the books
activities, which happens very widely in poor neighborhoods, then why should you bother to work? And so this offers a real opportunity to be able to say to people, if you work and work hard, you will achieve the American dream, and you will have a lifestyle that befits a hardworking person.
Sure. Okay.
And voting is your expression of saying what you want. But I feel a lot of times that the poor folks don't really get out to the polls and actually put their voice out there.
That's very true. And we have a theory in political science called rational choice theory. Rational choice theory basically says that people act rationally. That is, they do things that are important in their life based on some subconscious calculation of what will they gain from. And what we say about poor people, or many of us say, is the reason poor people don't vote is they've made the calculation and they know that no matter who wins, they're not going to get anything. And so they say, you know, why should I bother to vote? And there's some truth to that. And even to the extent that it isn't true, it becomes mythical, and people reach the point where that just becomes kind of the word in my neighborhood, if you will. And so that's one of the things that Obama's made a real impact on, and I hope that's sustainable. And that's one way where I think Obama's organizing experience may have a more lasting impact on politics in America.
So you were talking about that powerlessness that's felt by many in the community.
Yes. And
how do you change that? Because, you know, I just don't see that happening. Because do you feel like you really have control? Or do they have control?
It's problematic, there's no question, but that's what Alinsky taught, was that you start with little things. You start with people's ability to be able to make small changes. And that's why any political organizing has to be on a local basis, because you know, you can say to people, wow, because you organized, you elected the first black president.
Right.
But you can't say that every 4 years.
No, you can't.
And
that
so
runs out.
that runs out. And so there's going to have to be more sustainable things where you can say, I mean, the reason political machines worked, and I say the political machines really had more of an effect nationally, this is one of the things I'm studying currently, than people understood, because the political machine would deliver for the local mayor and the local alderman in their slate, but then when James Farley, who was the political aide to Roosevelt, came along and said, we need you to produce a big turnout for the president, they were capable of doing it.
Yeah.
So that was the hierarchical structure that could have a real impact on national politics as well as state and local politics.
Okay. Now, in our town, in Columbus, the big elections that are important seem to be the school board elections. Nothing else.
Yeah, I haven't studied Columbus politics enough. I'm beginning to get a sense of it. And there's this kind of truce, if you will, where people recognize, okay, this seat in the city council belongs to this person until they retire and give it to somebody else. And this belongs to this person, and we've got this balance of black and white, and we've got this combination, you know, a white mayor and a black city manager.
Yeah. Southern hospitality.
Right. And it's interesting because it almost strikes you as the Southern pattern of politics.
Okay.
Because if you go back to the days when the Democratic Party dominated in the South, it was a one-party system, and things were kind of worked out so that everybody knew who got what. And I see a little bit of that in Columbus, although Columbus is a very vibrant and progressive city in a lot of ways. So I don't know enough about it, but I see some trends and some interesting things about Columbus politics, and it will change. It can't last forever, and politics in the South is going to change. Politics in America is changing as we move back towards a more liberal era. I'm sorry, and so I think you'll see that starting to affect, You know, it goes up and down. The things at the top affect the things at the bottom. The things at the bottom affect the things at the top.
Sure.
And we're in an era now where we're moving back towards a more liberal era, and we're going to find we have whole new populations of people coming in to the country. A huge influx of Hispanics, slightly growing black population. We're moving to a minority majority country.
Right.
And so the politics will always be the same, yet it will always change.
Okay. Okay. Now, you've done organizing around getting out the vote in the minority community.
Yes.
How important is that, and what did you do?
We did the standard stuff, and I have to say we didn't do it very well, and that's one of the reasons that I was led to this idea of building political machines. We did what everybody does. We did voter registration drives.
Okay.
In recent years, since Motor Voter passed, the Motor Voter Act nationally,
Right.
it's a lot easier to register voters, but back at the time, when I was involved, we didn't have some of those advantages. We had only a few people were able to register voters.
Right.
All elected officials were, so we were constantly at the front line of having to go out and do the actual registration. We would get a bunch of us to do voter registration drives. We understood the importance of keeping those names and being able to call on those people. But getting them out didn't work very well because there was no connection between you know, the time when you registered people and the time when voting happened.
A lot of time could go by. Yeah.
And one of the characteristics, and one of the characteristics, and as you probably know, in poor neighborhoods, people relocate a whole lot more.
Right.
It's one of the one of the other reasons why poor people vote less. To answer your earlier question, but one of the characteristics of machines that made them work is, I say, they were 24/7, 365. They were always there working, and so they weren't asking someone who they had registered to vote, calling them up and saying, will you go and vote? They were saying, Mrs. Smith, this is what time I will pick you up, because you know that 6 months ago you asked me to help your son get a job for the summer, and he did.
Sure.
And I will pick you up to vote on such
There's
time.
a connection being built, a trust.
Sure.
A relationship, exactly.
Now, were you doing that yourself?
No, we weren't
No,
able
okay.
to. I mean, yes, it is endemic to politics. We did
Right.
some of it,
Okay.
but we didn't have the machinery. We didn't have the resources to be able to do it as much as we would have liked. And I was in one of the poorer wards. It was a overwhelmingly Italian city.
Okay.
The Irish had been in charge before. Then the Italians were in, and I was representing a black neighborhood where we were one of the lesser wards in terms of turnout, in terms of clout. So we didn't have the resources. We didn't have a lot of city jobs to offer. We had some. You know, I don't want to imply they were completely unfair, but we weren't at the center of things. And we could do some favors for people. And I had an assistant when I was council president who had been in politics before me in the old machine days. I got in to politics just after the machine in Providence had broken up.
Okay.
But he used to make sure that anybody that came to see me in my office was registered to vote. They would come in to see me. He wouldn't let them in the door. He would tell them, he would ask them if they were registered. If not, he would take them downstairs to the Board of Canvassers and get them registered and bring them up. And it was a problem because I had a lot of Hispanics, a lot of immigrants who weren't able to vote, and I had to fight with them and say, you know, let me help them out. They'll be voters someday. And he'd make me extract some sort of promise that they'd help me in some of the way. But he very much believed, and he was a very smart politician, and he was my aide, and he very much believed that's how you built political power.
Okay. Okay. Wow.
In the past 2 elections, there's been a great minority turnout, actually. Do you think it's because we have a minority president now, a black president, and that empowers a minority or makes them connect more to go out and vote?
There certainly is an amount of that. I have a favorite story. I have a black daughter, and when Obama was just about to be elected, and it looked like he was going to be elected, I said to her, Angie, what would it mean to you if Obama gets elected? And she said, and very quickly, with very little hesitation, she said, I'd finally feel like I belonged.
Wow.
And that was a very powerful story to me, and
Yeah.
it made me understand how important the election of a black president is to the black community. At the same time, Obama's organizing and his team's organizing has been very effective. So that's one of the reasons why I really question, is he going to be able to maintain it beyond the point of a black candidate. And I'm
Right,
sure he's very
right.
committed to doing that, and I'm sure he and his organization will try their best. But you wonder if all of the pieces are there that will allow that to keep it going.
Yeah, that's a real issue.
And yeah, and you know, I'm theoretically an expert on this stuff, and I don't know the answer. So the rest of you that are wondering, feel free to
place.
feel free to be skeptical.
So let's get back a little bit to your role here on campus.
Mm-hmm.
Do you work a lot with the students?
Yes, I have. I'm involved with a lot of organization. Public Heroes, Columbus State Public Heroes, the new service fraternity that we're starting.
Okay.
I've been involved with just individual events. I'm working right now with the Committee on Diversity. We're putting together a poster contest about diversity. Well, it's an essay contest that allows. We decided to make it an open essay, so we're allowing people to do posters, essays, dance, music, to do their express themselves. In fact, that's what it says on the poster we made up. Express yourself about diversity at Columbus and in the city of Columbus. It's co-sponsored by the mayor's office on diversity. And I'm not exactly sure the exact name of it, but and the Columbus State Diversity Committee.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm involved with that, and I'm working on some projects with Amanda Reese in some neighborhoods. We're trying a bunch of things. So I'm up to my ears with stuff, and hoping I can manage it all. I have this tendency.
On top of it.
Yeah, I do teach from time to time.
Now, when you're doing that stuff in the neighborhoods, are you bringing students along? Are you getting students?
That's certainly my goal.
Okay.
I'm still pretty much a rookie here.
Okay.
But that's our
first year.
plan.
How much do we want? Right.
Exactly. I'm trying to set up a project working with Kathy Williams, who is from the school board.
Yes.
Former chair of the school board, but she works for an organization called Neighborhood Works, and we're working with her on a project to do some research in neighborhoods, and I'm looking probably to have a graduate student work in the summer on that project.
Okay.
So
That'd be
I'm
great
going to
thing.
get exactly. So we're gonna get involved in a number of ways.
Super. Well, I have to stop you now because we've run out of time.
And I've run out of
But
breath.
but I'd like to ask you if you'd be willing to come back again and talk with us, because we'd love to have you.
I would be absolutely thrilled to do it. It's
we'd
been
like
a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Louisa,
Thank you, Louisa.
thank you very much.
I will release your partner.
Well,
for
good.
next session.
And I just want to, let you plug your own show if you want. You've got something coming up, Columbus 101.
Yeah, we'll be having a little Columbus 101 show where we're going to broadcast Columbus and show all the great things that the city has to offer. Hopefully it'll be on air soon.
Great. Well, thank you very much for watching. I just want to remind you, this has been Education Forum, and I'm Jeff Conklin.